You shall not attend his Grace's winter assembly, Evelyn, not while I have breath enough to prevent the humiliation. Araminta Vale held the cream invitation between two gloved fingers, high enough for the whole drawing room to see the ducal seal pressed into its red wax. Then she tore it in half. The sound was small. The laughter was not. Lady Corisande Vale covered her mouth with her fan, though she made no honest effort to hide her delight. Her friends, gathered beneath the crystal chandelier at Ravenshade, leaned toward one another in a shimmer of silk and pearls. A young baronet laughed openly. Two matrons exchanged looks of satisfied pity. Even the musicians near the bay window faltered before continuing their careful little waltz. Evelyn stood beside the mantel in the same grey gown she had worn through 3 winters. She did not reach for the torn pieces. Araminta let them fall at her feet. There, you may keep them as a souvenir. It is likely the nearest you shall ever come to a ducal ballroom. Another ripple of laughter moved through the room. Evelyn's father, Lord Benedict Vale, remained seated in his high-backed chair beside the fire. His fingers tightened once around the silver head of his cane. He looked at his daughter, then at his second wife, then down into the flames. He said nothing. That silence wounded more deeply than Araminta's triumph. Yet no one in that room knew the invitation had not been sent by a secretary, nor as an act of ordinary courtesy. It had been written under the Duke's direct instruction, and its destruction was about to disturb more than one proud family. Before we return to the beginning, tell us where you are listening from tonight. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next chapter. And if these stories bring you comfort, consider supporting the channel. Now let us go back to the winter when Evelyn Vale first learned how quietly a home could turn against its own child. 3 years earlier, Ravenshade had still seemed to belong to memory. The house stood above a dark line of yew trees in the northern countryside, with stone chimneys, narrow windows, and a drive that turned silver beneath frost. Evelyn had grown there beneath the gentler rule of her mother, Lady Marianne, whose portrait still hung in the long gallery. Lady Marianne had died when Evelyn was 16. Within 18 months, Lord Benedict married again. Corisande arrived with a carriage full of trunks, a daughter nearly Evelyn's age, and an expression of modest gratitude that vanished the moment no gentleman was watching. At first, the changes were small. Lady Marianne's blue sitting room became Araminta's music chamber. Her books were removed from the library and placed in boxes. Her personal maid was dismissed. Her silver-backed brushes disappeared from Evelyn's dressing table, though Corisande later claimed they had been misplaced by careless servants. Then the household accounts changed. Evelyn's allowance was reduced because Ravenshade had suffered poor harvests. Her riding horse was sold because the stables were too costly. Her mourning jewels were placed in Corisande's locked cabinet for safekeeping. Invitations addressed to Miss Evelyn Vale arrived late, or not at all. Araminta, meanwhile, acquired Paris silk, white gloves from London, garnet hair combs, velvet slippers, and a necklace of seed pearls said to have belonged to a distant aunt. No such aunt existed. Evelyn knew this because she had once helped her mother copy the family records. She remembered names, dates, marriages, deaths. She remembered the firm, elegant handwriting in the old ledgers. She remembered that Ravenshade's eastern farms had produced steady rents, even in harsh winters. But memory held no authority against a sealed account book. Corisande kept the estate ledgers in Lord Benedict's study. The study door remained locked. The key hung from her chatelaine. Evelyn questioned her father only once. It was a bitter evening, with sleet striking the library windows and the fire burning low. Lord Benedict sat under a green-shaded lamp, reading a parliamentary report he had not turned a page of in 20 minutes. "Father, may I ask what became of Mamma's settlement?" His eyes lifted slowly. "Your mother's settlement, the portion intended for me." He frowned, not in anger but in weariness. Corisande has explained this. Much of it was absorbed by obligations. What obligations? Estate obligations. Were they Ravenshade's debts? His mouth hardened. "You have no need to trouble yourself with such matters. But if the money was left for my future—" "Enough, Evelyn." The words struck the room flat. For the first time in her life, she understood that her father's weakness was not confusion. It was choice. He chose peace at the dinner table. He chose his wife's approval. He chose not to ask questions whose answers might demand courage, not cruelty, but surrender. And surrender could ruin a daughter just as thoroughly. After that night, Evelyn stopped appealing to him. She watched instead. She noticed Corisande never opened letters from the solicitor in the morning room. She carried them into the locked study. She noticed Mr. Pritchard, the estate steward, had begun avoiding her eyes. She noticed old Mrs. Bell, who had served as housekeeper under Lady Marianne, was sent away after 28 years without a character. The reason given was age. The true reason was that Mrs. Bell had seen too much. Before leaving, the old woman found Evelyn near the servants' stair. Her bonnet was tied badly beneath her chin. Her hands shook, not from age alone. "Miss Evelyn, there are things in this house that do not sit right." Evelyn glanced toward the passage. "What things?" Mrs. Bell's eyes moved to the upper corridor, where Lord Benedict's study lay. "Your mother kept copies." "Copies of what?" A door opened somewhere above them. Mrs. Bell caught Evelyn's wrist. "In the cedar box, miss. The one with the brass corners." She never trusted a single paper when two could be made. Footsteps approached. Mrs. Bell released her. "Remember that." Corisande appeared at the end of the corridor before Evelyn could ask more. Mrs. Bell was gone by noon. The cedar box had belonged to Lady Marianne. Evelyn remembered it clearly. It once sat beneath the window in her mother's sitting room and held ribbons, household receipts, and letters tied with blue thread. After Corisande transformed the room for Araminta, the box disappeared. For months, Evelyn searched without seeming to search. She checked the attics under the excuse of sorting old linen. She inspected the schoolroom cupboards. She asked the footman whether any trunks had been taken to storage. She even entered the unused nursery one afternoon, while Araminta rode with friends. Nothing. Then Ravenshade received news that the Duke of Alderwick would reopen Greyhaven House for the winter season. The Duke had spent years abroad managing family interests and was expected to take a wife. Every ambitious mother in 3 counties began calculating bloodlines. Corisande calculated faster than most. She ordered gowns for Araminta before any invitation had arrived. She wrote to acquaintances in London. She instructed the cook to prepare a dinner for families whose influence might secure an introduction. Evelyn watched the preparations from the household margins. She was not jealous of the gowns. She had learned to live without ornament. What unsettled her was the speed with which Ravenshade's supposed poverty vanished whenever Araminta's prospects were discussed. There was money for a sapphire sash, money for a new carriage lining, money for a dancing master from York. There was no money for repairing the tenants' roofs or paying Evelyn's promised allowance. Not scarcity, but theft disguised as necessity. One morning, Evelyn carried a tray to her father's room because his valet had taken ill. She passed the half-open door of Corisande's private parlour and heard Araminta speaking. Suppose the Duke remembers her. Corisande's reply came low and sharp. He met her once when they were children. Men do not build futures from nursery recollections. He asked after the Vale family in London. The Vale family includes you now, not by blood. A pause followed. Evelyn stood motionless beside the door, the teapot warming her palms. Corisande spoke again. Blood is useful only when property follows it. Your stepsister has neither beauty enough to command attention nor fortune enough to keep it, unless she learns what Lady Marianne left her. Silence. Then the soft clink of Corisande setting down a cup. She will not. Evelyn's breath caught. Araminta laughed nervously. You sound very certain. I have had 3 years to become certain. The corridor seemed to narrow around Evelyn. She moved away before the door could open, carrying the tray upstairs with steady hands. That evening she went to the kitchens. The servants' quarters were warmer than the upper rooms, though the warmth came from labour rather than comfort. Copper pans gleamed above the range. Onion skins lay curled near a chopping board. A pot of broth simmered beside trays of seed cake and currant buns, prepared for Corisande's guests. Martha Pike, the undercook, looked up from kneading dough. You'll freeze in that thin dress, miss. I am looking for Thomas. The old footman emerged from the pantry carrying a basket of coal. He had served Ravenshade since before Evelyn was born. His back had bent, but his mind remained exact. What can I do for you, Miss Evelyn? She lowered her voice. Do you remember my mother's cedar box? Thomas's weathered face changed. Only slightly, but enough. Brass corners? Yes. He glanced toward the door. Best not speak of old boxes where walls have ears. Martha snorted. These walls hear more than the parson, and repeat twice as much. Thomas gave her a warning look, though the corner of his mouth twitched. It was one of the few moments of humour left in Ravenshade. Evelyn stepped closer. Was it taken from the blue room? Thomas set down the coal. Her ladyship told me to move it after Lady Marianne died. Said Lord Benedict wished the room cleared. Where did you take it? To the old estate office. The old estate office stood beyond the stable yard, attached to a disused brewhouse. Coruscant rarely went there because the roof leaked and the windows rattled. Is it still there? Thomas hesitated. It was when Mrs. Bell left. Why did no one tell me? His expression held shame, because those who spoke were dismissed and those with children kept quiet. Evelyn could not blame him. Fear moved downward through a great house. The mistress frowned at the steward threatened the servants, and the servants carried their silence home to hungry families. Thank you, Thomas. Miss Evelyn. She paused. Do not go tonight. There is ice on the yard, and Mr. Pritchard has been in the old office twice this week. Why? I cannot say. But he burned papers after midnight. That was the second warning. The next morning, the Duke's invitation arrived. It came on heavy cream paper, delivered by a mounted servant in Greyhaven livery. The envelope bore Evelyn's name in a strong, slanting hand. Not Lady Coruscant's, not Miss Araminta Vale's, Miss Evelyn Vale. The butler received it before breakfast, but Coruscant intercepted it in the hall. Evelyn saw the exchange from the landing. Coruscant read the name. Her face tightened. Then she placed the envelope beneath a stack of household correspondence. At luncheon she announced that Greyhaven's invitations had not yet been issued. Evelyn said nothing. But Thomas found her later in the winter garden and whispered that he had seen the ducal seal. For the first time in her life, Evelyn chose not merely to endure a lie, but to test it. She waited until Coruscant and Araminta left for the village dressmaker. Then she entered the morning room and searched the writing desk. The invitation was gone. She checked the silver correspondence tray, the locked drawer, and the basket beside the hearth. Ash shifted beneath the grate. She knelt. Among the blackened scraps lay a corner of thick cream paper. One line remained visible. His Grace of Alderwick requests the honour. The rest had burned. Evelyn closed her fingers around the scrap. She felt no tears, only a stillness colder than the sleet outside. The invitation had been destroyed, but its existence proved something. Someone at Greyhaven had asked for her specifically. Why? She possessed no fortune. Her reputation had been quietly diminished. Coruscant had spent 3 years making her invisible, yet the Duke had remembered her. That afternoon, another envelope arrived. This one was addressed to Lady Coruscant. It contained invitations for herself, Lord Benedict, and Araminta. Coruscant's relief was immediate. She spoke of the assembly at dinner as though Evelyn had never been summoned. The Duke's return shall change society in the county, she said. Araminta, the white silk, not the green. A future duchess must never look eager. Araminta smiled across the candles. Evelyn may help fasten it. She has such capable hands. Lord Benedict stared at his plate. The table held roast pheasant, buttered carrots, glazed chestnuts, red currant jelly, and a steamed pudding soaked in brandy. Evelyn had eaten bread and broth at noon, yet the richness before her made her feel ill. Evelyn will not attend, Coruscant continued. Her wardrobe is unsuitable. She may have a new gown, Lord Benedict murmured. Every face turned toward him. It was the first resistance he had offered in months. Coruscant smiled slowly. From what funds? He lowered his eyes. The courage left him. Quite so, she said. The matter seemed settled, but 2 days later, a third invitation arrived. The Duke's own secretary delivered it, and requested that it be placed directly into Miss Evelyn Vale's hands. Coruscant could not hide it without witnesses. That was the invitation Araminta tore before the drawing-room guests. Now, after the laughter had faded and the musicians resumed their waltz, Evelyn looked down at the 2 halves near her shoes. The red seal had split through the Alderwick crest. Araminta stood radiant in pale blue silk. "Pick it up," she said. "Unless grief has made you too proud to stoop." Evelyn raised her eyes. "It is not grief that prevents me." The room quieted. Araminta's smile thinned. "Then what?" "The knowledge that you are watching." A baronet coughed into his hand. Corisande snapped her fan closed. "Evelyn, apologize. For being invited?" No one laughed then. Even Lord Benedict looked up. For one breath, Evelyn felt the balance shift. Not greatly, not enough to save her, but enough for everyone to see that she had not agreed to her humiliation. Corisande crossed the room. Her voice dropped. "You forget what roof shelters you." "No, my lady. I remember it every night." Corisande's eyes hardened. "Then remember also that shelter can be withdrawn." That threat was not spoken privately. It was spoken before neighbors, relations, and servants carrying wine. It was meant to reduce Evelyn to obedience. Instead, it clarified everything. Ravenshade was no longer her home. It was a place where her mother's money had vanished, her letters were burned, and her presence was tolerated only while useful. For the first time in her life, Evelyn understood that dignity sometimes required leaving before one was thrown out. A sound came from the front drive. Not the rattle of a hired trap, not the light wheels of a neighbor's phaeton. This was heavier. 4 horses, iron-rimmed wheels, the measured halt of a grand carriage. Conversation faltered. The butler entered the drawing room with an expression Evelyn had never seen upon his face. Astonishment. "My lord," he said to Lord Benedict, "Greyhaven's state carriage has arrived." The room went still. No one dared breathe. Corisande's hand tightened around her fan. Araminta looked toward the window. For whom? Before the butler could answer, a footman in dark green livery appeared behind him. Snow shone on his shoulders. He bowed. "His Grace, the Duke of Alderwick, has instructed me to convey Miss Evelyn Vale to Greyhaven House." Araminta's face emptied of colour. Corisande recovered first. "There has been some error." The footman produced a folded card. His Grace anticipated that objection. Lord Benedict rose unsteadily. Evelyn did not move. The footman crossed the room and offered her the card on a silver tray. The handwriting was the same as on the first envelope. Strong, slanting, direct. "Miss Vale, as my invitations appear unable to survive beneath your family's roof, I have sent something rather more difficult to tear. The carriage is yours for the evening. Alderwick." Silence settled over the room like snow. Not embarrassment now, but fear. Evelyn looked at the torn invitation on the carpet. Then she looked at Araminta. Her stepsister's lips parted, but no words came. Corisande stepped forward. "Evelyn, you cannot possibly leave without suitable preparation." It was no longer a command. It was desperation dressed as concern. Evelyn bent at last. She picked up the 2 halves of the invitation and placed them gently on the silver tray beside the Duke's card. "Then I shall attend exactly as I am." The old grey gown, the plain black shoes, no jewels. For the first time in her life, she crossed Ravenshade's drawing room while every person who had laughed watched in silence. At the threshold, Lord Benedict spoke. "Evelyn." She turned. His face held regret, fear, and something weaker than either. "Do you know why he has sent for you?" "No, father." That was true. But as she stepped into the frozen night and saw the ducal carriage waiting beneath blazing lamps, she remembered Mrs. Bell's warning, the cedar box, and Corisande's certainty that Lady Marianne's secret would never be found. Then she noticed a familiar object on the seat inside the carriage, a cedar box with brass corners. "You have brought her mother's box into another man's carriage." Corisande's voice cut across the frozen drive. Evelyn had placed 1 foot upon the carriage step. She stopped, but she did not turn at once. The Duke's footman stood beside the open door in dark green livery. Snow gathered on his shoulders. Inside the carriage, beneath the glow of 2 lamps, the cedar box waited upon the leather seat. Its brass corners were tarnished. A crescent-shaped scratch marked the lid. Evelyn had made that scratch as a child while trying to open the lock with one of her mother's hairpins. There could be no mistake. It was Lady Marianne's box. Corisande descended the steps of Ravenshade. Lord Benedict followed her into the doorway, leaning heavily upon his cane. Araminta stood behind him, her face pale after the humiliation in the drawing room. "That box belongs to this household," Corisande said. The footman bowed. His Grace was informed that it belonged to the late Lady Marianne Vale. His Grace was misinformed. Corisande reached for Evelyn's arm. "Come inside. This spectacle has gone far enough." Evelyn stepped away before the gloved fingers touched her. The movement was small. Everyone saw it. For the first time in her life, she refused Corisande without argument, apology, or appeal. "I have been invited to Greyhaven. You have no suitable gown." "His Grace knows what I am wearing." "You have no chaperone," the footman answered before Evelyn could. "Lady Agnes Hartcombe is waiting at Greyhaven House and has agreed to receive Miss Vale." Corisande's face tightened. Lady Agnes was the Duke's widowed aunt. Her name carried through every drawing room from York to London. She was known for strict manners, exact judgment, and a complete indifference to gossip. Araminta stepped forward. Why would Lady Agnes concern herself with Evelyn? No one answered. Evelyn entered the carriage. The cedar box sat beside her, nearer than any friend had been that evening. The footman closed the door, shutting out Corisande's voice. Through the glass, Evelyn saw her father beneath the arch. Lord Benedict's shoulders had bent, though the snow did not touch him. Araminta stared at the box. Corisande stared at Evelyn, not with contempt now, with fear. The carriage moved away from Ravenshade. Warm air rose from a foot warmer beneath the rug. A dark wool cloak had been folded on the opposite seat. The Duke had not merely sent transportation. He had anticipated the cold. Evelyn placed her hand upon the cedar lid. The lock had been broken. She opened the box. Faded blue silk lined the compartments. There were ribbons, household receipts, ivory sewing scissors, a small account book, and several letters tied with blue thread. Upon the top lay an envelope addressed in Lady Marianne's hand. For Evelyn, her fingers trembled. She did not open it. Not yet. After 3 years of having every choice made for her, she would decide when to read her mother's words. Beneath the envelope lay a visiting card. Mrs. Eleanor Bell. An address in London had been written below the name. Evelyn stared at it. Mrs. Bell had not vanished into poverty or death. She had gone to London. The carriage passed through Greyhaven's iron gates. The house stood beyond a long sweep of snow-covered lawn. Its windows glowed warmly against the dark. Lamps burned along the drive. Music reached Evelyn before the carriage stopped. Greyhaven's winter assembly had already begun. Lady Agnes received her in a private salon beside the entrance hall. She was tall and silver-haired, dressed in black velvet with a single diamond brooch at her throat. Her face was composed rather than cold. It was the face of a woman who had survived grief, scandal, and foolish relatives without allowing any of them to govern her. Evelyn curtsied. "My lady." Lady Agnes looked over the grey gown, the repaired gloves, the damp shoes, and the cedar box carried in behind her. "You came exactly as you were." The alternative was not to come. A sensible conclusion. She dismissed the servant and closed the door. A fire burned behind a brass screen. On a side table stood tea, preserved cherries, lemon cakes, thin sandwiches, and sugared almonds. Lady Agnes indicated a chair. "Sit. You look as though your family has been feeding upon your nerves." Evelyn sat. "How did my mother's box come here?" Lady Agnes poured tea. "The Duke will explain what belongs to him to explain, and what belongs to you, to observe whether you possess judgment." Evelyn accepted the cup. "Have you reached a conclusion?" "Not yet." Lady Agnes sat opposite her. "Do you know why you were invited tonight?" "No." "Do you believe it was romantic?" Evelyn almost laughed. "No, my lady." "Good. Araminta believes it must be. Your stepsister believes attention is a form of property." The sentence struck with such precision that Evelyn lowered her cup. Lady Agnes continued. 3 weeks ago, my nephew received a letter from a former housekeeper of Ravenshade. The writer claimed that Lady Marianne had entrusted documents concerning your settlement to a solicitor in London. She also claimed those documents had been concealed after your mother's death. Mrs. Bell. Yes. Evelyn looked at the visiting card. Why would she write to the Duke? Because her letters to your father were returned unopened, not unanswered, returned. The distinction was worse. Lady Agnes watched her absorb it. There was another reason. The late Duke of Alderwick witnessed part of your mother's marriage settlement. He was acquainted with her brother and knew something of the arrangements made for you. Then why was nothing done? The late Duke died before questions arose. My nephew discovered a reference among old family papers only this winter. What reference? A note directing the Alderwick solicitor to compare the Vale accounts with a sealed duplicate if Lady Marianne's daughter was ever deprived of her settlement. Evelyn's eyes moved to the cedar box. Is the duplicate inside? No. Hope rose and fell within one breath. Lady Agnes noticed. You are disappointed. I am learning not to confuse a clue with rescue. For the first time, the older woman's expression softened. That may be the most sensible statement made in this house tonight. A knock sounded. The Duke entered. He was taller than Evelyn remembered. In her mind, he had remained a boy of 17, who once lifted her over a flooded garden path. He was now a man near 30, dark-haired and broad-shouldered, dressed with an ease that made the elegance of other gentlemen seem carefully rehearsed. His eyes went first to Evelyn, then to the cedar box. Miss Vale, Your Grace. Forgive the unusual method of invitation. The carriage survived. A brief amusement touched his face. Lady Agnes nodded toward the box. Explain. The Duke closed the door. Mrs. Bell brought it to my London residence 4 days ago. She removed it from Ravenshade before her dismissal. Thomas believed it remained in the old estate office. Mrs. Bell wished him to believe that. She feared the steward would search her luggage if he knew she had taken it. Evelyn touched the broken lock. Why give it to you? She did not trust the post. She did not trust Lord Benedict's solicitor, and she believed Lady Corisande had begun searching for her. Corisande knew Mrs. Bell had the box, she suspected. That explained why Mr. Pritchard had visited the abandoned estate office. He had not gone there to review forgotten records. He had been searching. The Duke stepped nearer. Mrs. Bell also said the contents were incomplete when she found them. What was missing? A signed schedule of property attached to your mother's settlement. 2 letters were missing as well. They named the person responsible for administering the money. My father? Possibly. Evelyn lowered her eyes. You need not defend him to me, the Duke said. I was not going to. The answer surprised her. For the first time in her life, she spoke of Lord Benedict without rushing to protect his weakness. The Duke's voice remained quiet. Mrs. Bell believed Lady Marianne kept copies of household payments. If those records survive, they may show whether funds intended for you entered the Ravenshade accounts. The estate ledgers are locked in my father's study. Then we shall not rely upon them alone. Lady Agnes looked toward the ballroom. You must enter. If you remain hidden, Ravenshade will say you were ashamed. If you appear, they will say you were ambitious. Society has an accusation prepared for every woman who lacks money enough to silence it. Then why enter at all? Evelyn asked. Because the room where a lie is repeated may also become the room where it begins to fail. The Duke offered Evelyn his arm. She hesitated. Every guest would see the Duke of Alderwick enter his own ballroom with Evelyn Vale beside him. The gesture would protect her from open ridicule, but it would place her at the center of speculation. The Duke seemed to understand. You may enter with my aunt instead. Lady Agnes gave him a dry look. Do not pretend modesty now. You sent the state carriage. Evelyn placed her hand upon the Duke's arm. Let us not waste the journey. The ballroom doors opened. Light struck her first. Hundreds of candles burned above polished floors. Mirrors multiplied the flames. Women in ivory, crimson, and blue stood beneath garlands of winter greenery. Men in black coats turned from their conversations. The music stopped, not faded, stopped. The Duke entered with Evelyn beside him. A hush crossed the room. She felt every eye upon the grey gown. She felt the repaired seam beneath one sleeve and the worn fabric at the hem. She felt the absence of jewels at her throat. But she did not lower her head. Not pride, but refusal. A woman near the front whispered too loudly, "That is Lord Vale's eldest daughter." Another answered, "I heard she had declined society." A third voice murmured, "I heard society had declined her." The Duke halted. He turned toward the women. "Then society appears to have corrected its error." The speaker flushed. The musicians resumed. Lady Agnes conducted Evelyn through the necessary introductions. Countesses, neighbouring landowners, a magistrate, a retired admiral, 2 members of Parliament. Some were curious, some were kind. Some displayed the polished cruelty of people who never insulted directly when an eyebrow could do the work. Evelyn endured them. An elderly gentleman remembered Lady Marianne and spoke of coal she had provided for poor families during a severe winter. No one at Ravenshade had mentioned it in years. Corisanda had not merely taken her possessions, she had tried to erase the memory of her generosity. After the first dance, Lady Agnes led Evelyn into a portrait gallery. A man with iron-grey whiskers waited there with a leather document case. "Miss Vale, this is Mr. Harcourt, my nephew's solicitor." He bowed. "Your mother corresponded with my late partner. Do you have the duplicate?" "Not yet. There would be no easy rescue." Mr. Harcourt opened the case and removed a copied register page. "This entry confirms that a sealed packet was deposited with our firm shortly before Lady Marianne's death. Where is it now?" "It was transferred into storage after my partner retired. The inventory from that period is incomplete. Lost? Misfiled, I hope. And if it cannot be found, then other evidence must support your claim." Evelyn read the entry. Lady Marianne Vale. Settlement schedule. Duplicate retained upon private instruction. Below it stood another signature, Benedict Vale. Her father had signed the deposit register. He knew. For 3 years, Evelyn had wondered whether he had been deceived or overwhelmed. The signature answered her. His silence was not ignorance. It was fear of what the truth would demand. Mr. Harcourt removed another page. There is a further complication. The current Ravenshade accounts show payments drawn from a trust, but the recipient is identified only by initials. Which initials? A. V. Araminta Vale. Evelyn folded the copied page. The white silk, the dancing master, the carriage lining, the pearls. Each luxury became evidence. Can it be proved? With the original schedule, bank records, or the estate ledgers? The ledgers are at Ravenshade, and controlled by the people who may have altered them. Evelyn looked through the gallery arch toward the ballroom, where wealth moved gracefully beneath the chandeliers. Then I must return. The Duke's expression sharpened. To Ravenshade? The accounts are there. So is your stepmother. She has always been there. Lady Agnes spoke. Returning without a plan would be courage wasted upon theatre. Then I need a plan. For the first time in her life, Evelyn did not wait for someone else to provide one. She asked Mr. Harcourt what marks appeared in genuine ledgers. She asked how trust payments might be entered. She asked whether copied dates, figures, and names of tradesmen could assist an inquiry if the originals disappeared. A copy would not equal an original, he explained, but consistent notes made before alteration could lead to bank entries and independent witnesses. "Can you enter the study?" the Duke asked. "Corisande carries the key." "Always?" Evelyn remembered the chatelaine at her stepmother's waist. At dinner she places it beside her plate. The keys catch against the table. Lady Agnes nodded. "That is opportunity." "You will need someone trustworthy inside the house," Mr. Harcourt said. "Thomas. Anyone else?" Evelyn thought of the kitchens. "Martha Pike sees every tray that goes upstairs. She also knows which servants are dismissed before they can speak." The Duke studied her. "You have observed more than your family understands. Invisible people often see the most." Respect entered his expression. Before he could reply, a servant appeared. "Your Grace, Lord and Lady Vale have arrived." Evelyn turned. "They came here?" "In considerable haste." Of course they had. The carriage had not merely carried Evelyn away. It had pulled Corisande's fear behind it. Lord Benedict entered first, his cravat uneven. Corisande followed in dark green satin. Araminta wore white silk and the seed pearls. Evelyn wondered whether her own money had paid for both. Corisande approached with a composed smile. "Your Grace, what an unexpected honor you have shown our daughter." Our daughter. She had never used those words at Ravenshade. The Duke bowed. Miss Vale was invited. Naturally. We feared some misunderstanding had occurred after a household accident damaged her card. The Duke's voice remained mild. A remarkably selective accident. Corisande laughed. No one joined her. Lord Benedict moved toward Evelyn. "May I speak with you privately?" Urgency filled his face, not affection. Lady Agnes stepped between them. "Miss Vale is under my protection this evening. She is my daughter. Then you should find my protection unnecessary." Nearby guests fell silent. Corisande opened her fan. "Surely we need not turn a family matter into public entertainment." The Duke looked across the ballroom. It became public when the invitation was torn before witnesses. Araminta's cheeks reddened. Lord Benedict lowered his voice. "Evelyn, there are matters you do not understand." "Then explain them." "Not here. You had 3 years to explain them at home." The music continued, but the space around them seemed soundless. For the first time, Lord Benedict could not retreat behind silence. Too many people were watching. Too many stood beyond Corisande's influence. His eyes moved to the cedar box held by a Greyhaven servant. Corisande caught his arm. "Benedict is unwell." "No," he said. The word was weak, but audible. Her fingers tightened. "You are fatigued." I said no. Lord Benedict looked at Evelyn. "I signed the original deposit." Corisande went still. "What deposit?" Evelyn asked. "Your mother's settlement papers." The nearest conversations ceased. Mr. Harcourt stepped forward. The packet was lodged with Harcourt and Blaine, then transferred after Mr. Blaine's retirement. Lord Benedict looked startled to see him. Corisande recovered. "Old papers are misplaced every day." Evelyn kept her eyes upon her father. "Did you know money was taken from my trust?" He did not answer. That was answer enough. Araminta stepped forward. "Do not speak to Papa as though he were a criminal. Were you told where your gowns came from?" Evelyn asked. "I do not discuss bills." "Were you told?" Araminta lifted her chin. "Mama said Ravenshade provided for me." "Ravenshade or Marianne Vale?" A murmur moved through the guests. Corisande snapped her fan shut. "Enough. Evelyn has been encouraged into vulgar accusations by people who do not understand the sacrifices required to preserve an estate." "Whose sacrifices?" Corisande's eyes flashed. For one instant, her control broke. "You had no use for the money." The sentence fell into the ballroom. Plain, brutal, impossible to retrieve. No one dared breathe. Corisande tried to repair it. "I meant only that you were unmarried, residing at home, fully supported." "In a grey gown," Lady Agnes said, "while your daughter wears pearls." Araminta touched the necklace. The gesture condemned more than any reply. The Duke stepped forward. "Lady Corisande, did money from Miss Vale's settlement purchase Miss Araminta's clothing?" "Certainly not." "Then you will have no objection to the accounts being examined." "By whom?" "Mr. Harcourt, with a magistrate's assistance if necessary." Corisande's face hardened. "You exceed your place in our family. You have mistaken rank for permission." "I require neither from you." Lord Benedict looked as though the floor had vanished beneath him. Corisande turned upon him. "We are leaving." He did not move. Benedict. Still, he did not move. For the first time in 3 years, her command failed. Yet Evelyn knew public failure could make Corisande more dangerous in private. The documents in the cedar box were incomplete. The sealed duplicate was missing. The ledgers remained at Ravenshade. Corisande had been embarrassed. She had not been defeated. Evelyn stepped toward her father. "Give me the study key." Corisande's hand flew to her chatelaine. "You shall do no such thing." Lord Benedict looked at the keys. Then at Evelyn, then at the watching crowd. His courage came late and weakly, but it came. "The study is mine, Corisande, and the accounts are under my management. That was my mistake." Her expression became cold, not furious, but calculating. Evelyn knew that look. It came before a servant was dismissed, before a letter entered the fire, before a room was emptied. Lord Benedict reached toward the key ring. Corisande stepped back. "I do not have it." The lie was obvious. The ring hung at her waist, but its largest brass key was missing. Someone had taken it before the family left Ravenshade. Mr. Pritchard, the steward. Evelyn remembered Thomas's warning. Pritchard had burned papers in the old estate office. If Corisande had sent him ahead, the ledgers might already be in the flames. She turned to the Duke. "We must return now. Tonight, before the evidence is destroyed." Corisande gave a thin laugh. "You imagine yourself very clever." Evelyn met her eyes. "No, I imagine you frightened." A Greyhaven servant hurried into the ballroom. He crossed to the Duke and whispered. The Duke's expression changed. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "A boy from Ravenshade stables has arrived. He says the old estate office is burning." Corisande did not gasp. She smiled, and Evelyn understood that the fire was not meant to destroy only papers. Thomas had gone there to wait for her. "Turn the carriage around." The Duke's command cut through the ballroom before the servant had finished bowing. For one breath, no one moved. Then Greyhaven came alive. Footmen hurried toward the entrance. A groom ran for the stables. Lady Agnes ordered lanterns, blankets, and the physician's case brought down. Mr. Harcourt closed his document case and followed the Duke. Evelyn turned to Lord Benedict. "Is there another key to the old estate office?" Her father's face had gone grey. "Pritchard carries one." "And the study?" "On the same ring." Corisande remained near the ballroom doors. The faint smile upon her lips had not vanished. Not shock, but relief. Evelyn saw it. Lady Agnes saw it too. "You knew," Evelyn said. Corisande lifted her chin. "I knew only that neglected buildings catch fire in winter. And neglected account books burn particularly well." Araminta looked between them. "Mamma?" Corisande did not answer. The Duke stepped beside Evelyn. "You will not return alone. I did not intend to." For the first time in her life, Evelyn did not confuse isolation with courage. She had witnesses now. A solicitor, a duke, and a woman whose rank Corisande could not dismiss. More importantly, she understood that accepting help did not mean surrendering control. Lady Agnes placed a dark cloak around her shoulders. "The road will be bitter." Corisande gave a soft laugh. "How touching." Lady Agnes turned. "You mistake preparation for sentiment. It is a common error among people who prepare only for themselves." The room fell silent. The Duke looked at Lord Benedict. "You will come with us?" He nodded. "Yes." "I shall come too," Corisande said. "No," Evelyn replied. Every face turned toward her. Corisande's eyes narrowed. "You have no authority over me. Then remain, because leaving now would look like flight." The words held her more firmly than a command. Corisande had always used reputation to govern others. Now reputation trapped her beneath the chandeliers. Araminta caught her mother's sleeve. "We cannot stay while they accuse us." "We will stay," Corisande said, "and we will say nothing more." The carriage left Greyhaven beneath heavy snow. Evelyn sat opposite Lord Benedict. Mr. Harcourt rode beside him. The Duke sat at her right as the wheels struck frozen ruts. The cedar box rested beside Evelyn. No one spoke for the first mile. At last, Lord Benedict looked at its scratched lid. "Your mother believed she would live to explain everything herself. Did she know money was being taken?" "Not at first, but you did." He looked toward the dark window. Corisande said, "Ravenshade required temporary support. Before you married her?" "After." Mr. Harcourt leaned forward. "You permitted withdrawals from Lady Marianne's settlement after marrying Lady Corisande." Lord Benedict flinched. "The estate had obligations." "The estate," Evelyn said, "or Araminta. I told myself there was no difference. She had become part of the household, and I had ceased to be?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Evelyn felt no heat of anger. What remained was colder. "You allowed my mother's money to be spent. You knew copies existed. You returned Mrs. Bell's letters unopened. I did not dismiss her. You permitted it." He lowered his head. "Not one betrayal, but years of surrender." The Duke spoke quietly. "Why was the settlement not enforced?" "Lady Marianne's brother died abroad. The solicitor who prepared the papers retired. Corisande said the trust could be administered privately until Evelyn married." Mr. Harcourt's expression hardened. "A convenient interpretation. I was ill that winter." Evelyn remembered 6 weeks of fever. Corisande had controlled his medicine, visitors, and letters. "Did you sign papers while ill?" "Several." "Did you read them?" Silence answered. The Duke looked at Mr. Harcourt. Could those signatures grant control? They might create the appearance of authority. Whether that authority was lawful is another question. Evelyn began to understand the scale of the deception. Corisande had not merely taken money when no one watched. She had built a structure around the theft. Signatures, altered entries, false explanations. A lie supported by paper could govern a household for years, unless the papers contradicted one another. Father, what name appeared on the trust? Marianne Vale Settlement. Who issued the payments? At first, the solicitor, and later, Pritchard arranged transfers through the estate bank. Mr. Harcourt stared at him. A steward was given access to a private settlement. Corisande said it was efficient. The Duke's voice became cold. Efficiency is a useful word when honesty would be inconvenient. The carriage descended toward Ravenshade. An orange glow appeared beyond the trees. The old estate office was burning. Flames had broken through the roof. Smoke rolled across the stable yard. Servants formed a line from the pump, passing buckets through the snow. The carriage had barely stopped when Evelyn reached for the door. The Duke caught her wrist. Wait. A beam collapsed inside the building. Sparks flew upward. Thomas is in there. And entering the fire will not save him. Not a command, but reason. She forced herself to remain until the wheels stopped. Then they ran. The cold struck through Lady Agnes's cloak. Horses stamped nearby. A stable boy stood beside the pump, soot blackening his face. Evelyn seized his shoulders. Where is Thomas? Inside when it began, miss. He sent me to fetch help. Did he come out? The boy shook his head. Lord Benedict called for Pritchard. No one answered. The Duke directed the servants to pull down a burning section before the flames reached the brewhouse. Mr. Harcourt helped drag a water barrel closer. Evelyn stared at the office door. Smoke poured through the frame. Then a figure appeared. Bent. Staggering. Thomas emerged with one arm across his mouth and a ledger clutched beneath the other. 2 grooms reached him before he fell. Evelyn dropped beside him. Thomas. His eyes opened. Knew you'd come, miss. He coughed until his body shook. The Duke knelt. Do not force yourself. Thomas pressed the ledger toward Evelyn. Not this one. She took it. The leather cover was scorched. What is it? The copybook. Mrs. Bell told me where Lady Marianne hid it. Beneath the false board. His voice weakened. Pritchard found me before I could leave. Where is he? Thomas moved his eyes toward the lower gate. A shout rose from the yard. A man was mounting a horse near the hedgerow. Pritchard struck the animal hard. It lunged onto the frozen lane. For a moment, it seemed he would escape. Then the horse slipped. Animal and rider went down in the snow. Pritchard rolled clear and tried to run, but 3 grooms caught him before he reached the trees. They dragged him beneath the yard lantern. His coat was torn. Ice had cut one cheek. His eyes went first to Lord Benedict, then to the ledger in Evelyn's hands. Fear entered his face. Not fear for Thomas, fear for the book. I was saving records from the fire, he said. Thomas made a rough sound. Saving them into it. Lord Benedict stepped forward. Did you set the fire? No, my lord. Did Lady Corisande order you to destroy the accounts? No. Both answers came too quickly. Mr. Harcourt approached. Then you will not object to waiting until a magistrate hears your explanation. The Duke nodded to the grooms. Put him in the tack room. 2 men outside. You cannot detain me. You attempted to flee a burning office, while an old servant remained inside. The Duke's tone stayed calm. You may defend yourself in comfort. As the grooms led him away, Pritchard looked at Evelyn. That book proves nothing. She glanced at the scorched cover. Then you should not have tried so hard to burn it. Thomas was carried into the servants' hall. Martha Pike wrapped him in blankets while the Greyhaven physician examined him. 28 years in service, and tonight you decide to roast yourself like a Christmas goose. Thomas managed a weak smile. Thought you'd complain if I came back cold. You came back foolish. A small laugh moved through the kitchen. Shaken, necessary. The physician found no broken bones. Thomas had inhaled smoke, but his burns were slight. Evelyn placed the rescued ledger upon the kitchen table. Inside, Lady Marianne's handwriting filled the first pages. Dates, sums. Signatures, coal for tenants, repairs to cottages, a widow's pension. Evelyn's education, a yearly amount reserved for her future independence. The entries continued until Lady Marianne's final illness. Then came Lord Benedict's hand. For several months, the figures remained orderly. After that came Pritchard's writing. Money moved from the trust into Ravenshade's accounts. Beside, several payments appeared: C.V. Corisande Vale. Others bore A.V. Araminta Vale. One page listed a London dressmaker, a jeweller, and a carriage builder. The white silk, the seed pearls, the new carriage lining. Mr. Harcourt read in silence. Evelyn turned another page. A line had been written in red ink. By instruction of Lady C. Vale, prior schedules to be superseded. Below it stood Lord Benedict's signature. "I do not remember signing that," he said. "You signed papers while ill. Corisande brought them to my room." Mr. Harcourt examined the signature. "It may be genuine." Lord Benedict sank against the wall. "Then I destroyed your mother's protections." "No," Evelyn replied. "You abandoned them. The distinction mattered. Destruction might occur in one terrible moment. Abandonment happened each day. For the first time in her life, Evelyn did not soften the truth to spare him. A narrow sheet had been sewn into the binding. Mr. Harcourt cut the thread. It listed account numbers and transfer dates. At the bottom, Lady Marianne had written that the duplicate schedule was lodged in London. The cedar copy was to remain separate, and Eleanor Bell was to be consulted if Benedict yielded control. Mrs. Bell had not merely witnessed the truth. Lady Marianne had chosen her to protect it. The truth had been placed in the hands of a housekeeper, because a housekeeper could go where titled men did not look, from below upward. Exactly as corruption had travelled from above downward. Mr. Harcourt folded the sheet. "This is enough to trace the transfers, enough to recover the trust. Perhaps, not enough to prove every act." The Duke looked toward the corridor. "Then we need the study ledgers." Lord Benedict straightened. "The study is locked." A voice came from the doorway. "Not any longer." Martha stood there holding a brass key between two flower-covered fingers. "Where did you find it?" Lord Benedict asked. "In Pritchard's coat, when the grooms dragged him past the pantry." She placed it in Evelyn's hand. "A man should not keep stolen keys where a kitchen woman can reach them." They went upstairs. The corridor outside the study lay dark. Evelyn carried a candle. The Duke and Mr. Harcourt followed. Lord Benedict came last. At the door she paused. How often had she passed this room while the truth waited behind it? The key turned. Inside, desk drawers stood open. Most of the estate ledgers were gone. "He moved them," Lord Benedict whispered. Mr. Harcourt searched the shelves. Not all. 3 books remained behind a row of parliamentary reports. The newest had missing pages and overwritten figures. Evelyn compared it with Lady Marianne's copybook. One payment of £200 was entered as repairs to tenant cottages. In the copybook, the same sum belonged to Araminta's London wardrobe. Another was listed as stable improvement. Lady Marianne's record named a jeweller. Not errors, but disguises. A floorboard creaked outside. The Duke opened the door. Lucy, one of the upstairs maids, stood barefoot in the corridor. "Forgive me, Your Grace." Evelyn recognized the fear in her face. "What is it?" Mrs. Pike said. "I should tell you what I heard. Come inside." Lucy clasped her hands. "Last night, I carried hot water past Lady Corisande's room. The door was not quite shut. Mr. Pritchard was inside, a half-open doorway. Truth caught at its edge. What did they say? Her ladyship told him to take the study books to the old office. She said if anyone asked, damp had spoiled them. And the fire? Lucy's eyes filled. Mr. Pritchard asked whether burning them would be safer. Lady Corisande said smoke had ended more questions than honesty ever had. The room went still. Mr. Harcourt spoke gently. "Will you repeat that before a magistrate?" Lucy looked terrified. "I shall lose my place." Evelyn answered first. "You will not." Lucy looked at her. "Whether I remain at Ravensshade or leave it, you will not be dismissed for telling the truth." For the first time in her life, Evelyn made a promise supported not by power already given to her, but by power she intended to earn. Lucy nodded. Then I will say it. The remaining hours passed in work. They copied figures, listed missing pages, and marked tradesmen whose receipts might confirm the transfers. The Duke sent a groom to summon the magistrate. Another messenger rode for London with instructions to search the solicitor's storage. Evelyn compared dates, calculated totals, and remembered which cottages had truly been repaired. Years of quiet observation became useful. At sunrise, Mr. Harcourt leaned back. "Miss Vale, have you ever kept formal accounts? Only household lists. You have an uncommon mind for figures. Corisande said they were unsuitable for women." "Then Lady Corisande has been wrong in more than one ledger." A servant entered with a telegram from London. The Duke broke the seal. "The sealed packet has been found." The room fell silent. "Where?" Mr. Harcourt asked. "In a storage chest beneath the retired partner's private index. It will arrive by the afternoon train." Evelyn felt no triumph, only alignment. The cedar box, Mrs. Bell, Thomas's ledger, Lucy's testimony. Separate truths were becoming one truth. Mr. Harcourt gathered the papers. "Lady Corisande must not know the duplicate has been located. She will believe the fire destroyed everything," the Duke said. Evelyn looked toward the pale morning. "Then we must let her believe it." Lord Benedict stared at her. "What are you proposing?" "We return to Greyhaven. You will tell Corisande that most records burned and Thomas cannot speak." He looked appalled. "You ask me to deceive my wife. You deceived me for 3 years." He flinched. "This time, the lie will protect the truth instead of burying it." The Duke studied her. "What will Corisande do if she believes the evidence is gone?" "She will secure what she wanted before questions begin again." Mr. Harcourt understood. "She may persuade Lord Benedict to sign a new transfer, or move the remaining trust money into the estate account," Evelyn said. Lord Benedict gripped the chair. "I will sign nothing. She cannot know that." "What must I do?" "Behave as you always have." The answer wounded him. Evelyn did not withdraw it. They returned to Greyhaven late that morning. Corisande waited with Araminta. "Well?" Lord Benedict removed his gloves slowly. "The office is destroyed. And the books? Burned. All of them?" He hesitated. "Enough." Relief entered Corisande's shoulders. "And Thomas?" "Alive, but unable to give an account." Another flash of relief. Araminta sat near the window. "Then this dreadful business is finished." Evelyn entered. Corisande looked at her. "Yes, it is finished." Evelyn lowered her eyes as though defeated. "Perhaps." Corisande approached. "You will return to Ravenshade until suitable arrangements are made." "What arrangements?" "A companion's position in London. Exile disguised as employment." "To whom?" "A respectable widow." "Her name?" "That is not your concern. It is if I am to live in her house." "You will do as your father directs." Lord Benedict stared at the carpet. He performed his old surrender. "Evelyn, perhaps it would be best." Corisande mistook the performance for victory. "You will leave after Greyhaven's closing supper tomorrow." The Duke stood near the doorway. "That supper is not your household event to command." Corisande smiled. "Then I am sure your Grace understands our need for privacy afterward." "Perfectly." His agreement pleased her. It should not have. That afternoon the sealed duplicate arrived from London. Mr. Harcourt opened it in Lady Agnes's library before Evelyn, the Duke, Lord Benedict, Mrs. Bell, and the magistrate. Mrs. Bell had travelled on the same train. When Evelyn saw her, the lost years seemed to fall away. The old housekeeper held Evelyn's face between her hands. "You look like your mother," when she had decided to frighten a dishonest man. Evelyn laughed once, then wept. Not from helplessness, from recognition. The duplicate confirmed everything. A substantial sum had been reserved solely for Evelyn. Lord Benedict could administer the income during her minority, but he could not transfer the principal for estate expenses or another daughter's benefit. Attached letters named Mrs. Bell as witness to Lady Marianne's instructions. The account numbers matched those sewn into the rescued ledger. Mr. Harcourt compared the papers until dusk. "This is sufficient for an immediate accounting, recovery of the remaining funds, and a formal inquiry." The magistrate folded Lucy's statement. "The attempted destruction of records will be considered separately." Lord Benedict covered his face. Mrs. Bell looked at him without pity. "You were trusted, my lord." "I know." "No. You know now because the room is full." Lady Marianne knew when it was empty. He had no answer. The closing supper began the next evening. Corisande entered Greyhaven's ballroom, believing the evidence had burned. She wore crimson. Araminta wore the seed pearls. Lord Benedict walked beside them, pale and obedient. Evelyn appeared in a simple dark blue gown borrowed from Lady Agnes. For the first time in her life, she wore something chosen not to hide her poverty or advertise another woman's wealth, but to let her stand comfortably in her own body. The same guests who had witnessed the accusation filled the room. Corisande spoke of an unfortunate fire, confused servants, and Evelyn's fragile nerves. The rumors spread exactly as she intended. Shortly before supper, she drew Lord Benedict into the library. The door remained slightly open. A document waited upon the desk. Evelyn stood in the dark corridor with the Duke, Mr. Harcourt, Mrs. Bell, Lucy, and the magistrate. Corisande's voice came through the opening. "Sign it, Benedict. I thought the matter could wait. It cannot. Evelyn leaves tomorrow. Once Araminta's settlement is secured, no one can disturb it without exposing the family. What does the paper transfer? The remaining trust balance into Ravenshade's estate account. Evelyn's trust?" A pause. Then Corisande's patience broke. "Do not become moral now. It sits poorly upon you." No one in the corridor moved. "The old woman's papers are ash. Thomas will remember whatever we pay him to remember. Pritchard will hold his tongue. Sign, and by spring Araminta will possess enough to attract Alderwick or another man of equal rank. And Evelyn? She will be gone. With nothing? She has always had nothing. We merely made it official." The magistrate stepped toward the door. Evelyn raised one hand. "Not yet." Inside, paper moved across the desk. "Sign," Corisande repeated. Lord Benedict asked the question Evelyn had given him. "Did you order Pritchard to burn the ledgers?" Silence. What a foolish thing to ask. "Did you?" Corisande's voice hardened. "I ordered him to remove a danger. The method was his concern. Thomas might have died. Thomas is a servant." The words struck the corridor. Plain. Final. The Duke opened the door. Corisande turned. Behind him stood Evelyn, Mr. Harcourt, Mrs. Bell, Lucy, and the magistrate. Lord Benedict dropped the pen. Corisande looked at the sealed duplicate in Mr. Harcourt's hands. For the first time, fear stripped every refinement from her face. Evelyn entered the library and placed Lady Marianne's rescued ledger beside the unsigned transfer. "This is the part you failed to burn." The magistrate reached for the ballroom doors. On the other side stood Araminta, wearing pearls bought with stolen money and smiling because she still believed the evening belonged to her. Araminta's smile vanished when she saw the people gathered inside the library. The magistrate opened the ballroom doors. Music faltered. Conversation thinned into silence. The guests nearest the entrance turned first. Those farther away rose on their toes or shifted around one another, eager to see what had interrupted the evening. Within moments, the whole assembly faced the library. It was the same kind of crowd that had laughed at Ravenshade when Araminta tore Evelyn's invitation. Now no one laughed. The Duke stepped into the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret that supper must wait. A serious matter concerning the Vale family has come to light, and those already made witnesses to public accusations should also hear the truth." Corisande moved quickly. "Your Grace, this is outrageous. You cannot expose a private family dispute before society." Lady Agnes appeared beside the ballroom doors. "You exposed it when your daughter tore Miss Vale's invitation before a room full of guests." Her voice carried without effort. "Privacy cannot be claimed only when the truth becomes inconvenient." Corisande looked toward Lord Benedict. "Stop this." He stood beside the library desk, pale beneath the candlelight. For years, that command would have been enough. Not tonight. "I will not," he said. The ballroom went still. For the first time in his life, Lord Benedict spoke against his wife while others were present to hear him. Corisande stared at him as though a piece of furniture had answered back. Araminta entered the library slowly. Her fingers touched the seed pearls at her throat. "What is happening?" Evelyn looked at her. The money used to purchase your gowns, jewels, and carriage fittings came from my mother's settlement. Araminta's face tightened. That is a lie. Mr. Harcourt lifted the sealed duplicate. It is supported by Lady Marianne Vale's original settlement schedule, the solicitor's register, bank references, household copies, and altered estate accounts. You cannot accuse me of theft, Araminta said. I signed nothing. No one has said you did, Evelyn replied. The distinction checked her anger. Araminta looked toward Corisande. Mamma told me Ravenshade paid for everything. Corisande recovered enough to laugh. Of course it did. Mr. Harcourt is creating scandal from household bookkeeping. Evelyn was supported under this roof. Money moved where it was needed. The magistrate stepped forward. The settlement did not permit that movement. Corisande's fan trembled once. And you have accepted the word of servants against mine? Mrs. Bell came out of the library. Her old black dress was plain among the satin and velvet, but she stood straighter than many titled women in the room. Not merely our word, my lady. Corisande's eyes narrowed. You, yes. The woman whose letters Lord Benedict returned, unopened. The woman Lady Marianne trusted, because she feared exactly what has happened. Mrs. Bell held up one of Lady Marianne's letters. Her ladyship instructed that the settlement was for Miss Evelyn alone. She named me as witness. She kept copies because she knew a woman's intentions could disappear beneath a husband's signature. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Not idle gossip now. Recognition. Many of the women present understood too well how property passed through male hands, how a daughter's future could be altered in a locked study, how easily obedience was, praised when it benefited someone else. Corisande pointed toward Mrs. Bell, a dismissed servant, seeking revenge. Thomas's voice came from the ballroom entrance. Then she has been remarkably patient about it. Heads turned. He stood between Martha Pike and the Greyhaven physician, one hand bandaged, his face grey from smoke. He should have been in bed. Instead, he had crossed the house because the truth required someone Corisande had always believed too low to matter. Mrs. Bell's eyes filled. Thomas, you old fool. So I have been informed. A fragile ripple of laughter passed through the room and died quickly. Thomas faced the magistrate. I found Lady Marianne's copy ledger beneath the false board in the estate office. Mr. Pritchard came upon me while I was taking it out. He struck the lantern from the desk and shut the door as the flames rose. Corisande spoke at once. You were confused by smoke. Thomas looked at her. Smoke did not make him lock me in. The room became utterly silent. Pritchard had been brought from Ravenshade under guard before the supper began. At the magistrate's signal, 2 men led him into the ballroom. His confidence had vanished. Soot remained beneath his fingernails. His coat was scorched at one sleeve. Corisande's face changed when she saw him. Not fear this time. Calculation. Mr. Pritchard, she said, you must tell them that I ordered no fire. He looked at the watching crowd, then at the Duke, then at the magistrate. Her ladyship told me to remove the books. That is not the same as burning them. You said there must be nothing left for Miss Evelyn to find. Corisande's control cracked, because the accounts were private. Pritchard laughed once, without humor. You told me if the old office burned, everyone would blame the stove. The ballroom seemed to contract around her. Araminta stared at her mother. Did you know Thomas was inside? Corisande did not look at her. This man is trying to save himself. Did you know? Araminta repeated. I knew only that the office must be cleared. Thomas lifted his bandaged hand. She knew I kept the keys to the old records. That was not full proof of intent to harm him. It did not need to be. Everyone understood what Corisande had been willing to risk. The magistrate raised one hand. The formal inquiry will determine criminal responsibility. Tonight, we address the documents and the attempted transfer found upon the library desk. Mr. Harcourt carried the unsigned paper into the ballroom. This document would have moved the remaining trust balance into Ravenshade's general estate account. It was prepared after Lady Corisande believed the original evidence had burned. Corisande looked toward Lord Benedict. You asked me to protect the estate. I asked you to help manage it. There is no difference. There is every difference. His voice shook, but it did not fail. He stepped into the ballroom. My first wife placed her faith in me. I permitted her daughter's inheritance to be used for another household. I signed papers I did not read. I silenced questions because answering them would have forced me to oppose my wife. He looked at Evelyn. I did not steal the money with my own hands, but I made the theft possible every time I chose peace over my child. No one moved. Lord Benedict's confession did not absolve him. It made the truth complete. Corisande's eyes burned. And now you parade your weakness as virtue. No, he said. I name it because Evelyn should not have to carry it as shame. For the first time, something in her expression faltered, not remorse. The recognition that she had lost him. Araminta removed the pearl necklace. Her hands shook as she placed it upon a table. I did not know. Evelyn believed her. Araminta had enjoyed the money. She had mocked the grey gown. She had torn the invitation and laughed while Evelyn stood before witnesses. But she had not built the scheme. Her cruelty had grown in the shelter of Corisande's lies. That did not make her innocent. It made her responsible for different wrongs. You knew enough to humiliate me, Evelyn said. Araminta lowered her eyes. The words struck without shouting. Corisande turned upon her daughter. Do not stand there looking guilty. Everything I did was for you. Araminta looked up. You used her money to make me desirable. I secured your future. You made my future depend upon someone else's ruin. Corisande's voice sharpened. Do you think affection would have brought you a duke? Do you think society rewards innocence? It rewards position, fortune, and appearance. I gave you all three. None of them were mine. The admission seemed to age Araminta in a single moment. She touched her bare throat. For the first time in her life, she saw herself without her mother's promises around her. The Duke stepped forward. Miss Araminta, you should understand that no marriage proposal has been contemplated. A murmur moved through the room. Araminta's face flushed. Corisande looked at him. You invited the family. I invited Evelyn. The statement was simple. It destroyed the final illusion upon which Corisande had built her plan. She looked from the Duke to Evelyn. Then this has all been a seduction disguised as justice. Evelyn answered before anyone else could. No. Justice is not a gift the Duke has given me. She stepped into the center of the ballroom. The borrowed blue gown moved softly around her feet. She wore no jewels. Lady Marianne's ledger rested in her hands. Mrs. Bell preserved the box. Thomas saved the ledger. Lucy repeated what she heard. Martha found the key. Mr. Harcourt traced the accounts. My father finally spoke. His Grace gave us a room in which the truth could be heard. She looked directly at Corisande, but the truth existed before any powerful man believed it. The silence that followed was deeper than applause. Several servants stood near the doors. Their faces changed first. They understood what had been named. Truth did not become truth when rank approved it. It merely became harder to bury. The magistrate addressed Corisande. You will surrender all keys, correspondence, and papers concerning the Marianne Vale settlement. You are not to remove property from Ravenshade until an inventory is completed. You cannot command me from my own house, Lord Benedict answered. Ravenshade is mine. She turned upon him. And you would cast me out after I preserved it. You preserved your control of it. Mr. Harcourt spoke. The estate was not saved by these transfers. Several tenant repairs listed in the ledgers were never made. Funds were diverted while debts remained. A landowner near the front frowned. My agent inspected the eastern cottages last autumn. 2 roofs were near collapse. Another gentleman murmured agreement. The social consequence began at once. Not a sentence announced by law. A withdrawal. A step backward. A countess who had often welcomed Corisande lowered her eyes and moved away. A matron closed her fan. One gentleman offered Araminta a chair but did not speak to her mother. Doors were already closing. Corisande saw it happen. The invitations that had once arrived would stop. The visits would shorten. Names would disappear from lists. People who had enjoyed her dinners would discover moral objections after dessert was no longer available. She had understood society perfectly. That was why its rejection terrified her. You are all hypocrites, she said. No one contradicted her. Hypocrisy did not make the evidence false. The magistrate instructed that Corisande remain at Greyhaven until transport could be arranged under supervision. Pritchard would be held for examination concerning the fire and the destruction of records. Lord Benedict asked that Corisande be permitted to stay in a small dower house belonging to distant relatives while legal matters were settled. She stared at him. "You are sending me away?" "Yes." "For her?" He looked at Evelyn. "No, because I should have done it when the first letter was burned." Corisande's face crumpled for one instant. Then pride returned. She turned to Evelyn. "I suppose you expect me to beg. I expect nothing from you." That answer wounded her more than hatred would have. Corisande stepped closer. "Your mother would have forgiven." Mrs. Bell spoke from behind Evelyn. "You never knew her well enough to use her mercy as a weapon." Corisande looked at Evelyn again. Her voice lowered. "I did what women must do when men own the houses, the land, and the money. I secured a place for my daughter because no one would hand her one. There it was, the motive beneath the cruelty. Not madness. Not evil without shape. Fear sharpened into greed. A woman trapped by the same order she had chosen to enforce against another woman. Evelyn understood it. Understanding did not require forgiveness. "You could have taught Araminta to build a life," Evelyn said. "Instead, you taught her to take mine." Corisande's lips trembled. "I am sorry you suffered." Not an apology for what she had done, only for the result she could no longer hide. Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. Corisande waited for absolution. It did not come. Sometimes, silence was not weakness. Sometimes, it was a closed door. The guests dispersed slowly after the magistrate finished speaking. Supper was served late, though few people ate much. The ballroom had ceased to be a place of amusement. It had become a court of public memory. By the end of the week, Mr. Harcourt had secured the remaining trust funds. Bank records confirmed repeated transfers into Ravenshade's estate account and payments to Corisande's London tradesmen. Several purchases were returned or sold. The seed pearls went first. Araminta asked that they be sold without delay. The money recovered could not restore every lost year, but enough remained to provide Evelyn with independence. Lord Benedict offered her Ravenshade. She refused. "I do not want a house merely because I suffered inside it." He looked older than he had a week earlier. "Then what will you do? Work." It was not the answer he expected. Neither was it an act of desperation. Mr. Harcourt had offered Evelyn a position assisting with household and estate accounts managed through his London office. Respectable people considered such work unusual for a gentleman's daughter. Evelyn accepted. Lady Agnes helped her find rooms above a widow's stationery shop in Bloomsbury. The rooms were small. The windows rattled. Coal had to be measured carefully. But the key belonged to Evelyn. London gave her no grand welcome. It gave her work. She travelled by omnibus through wet streets beneath gas lamps. She copied rents, checked invoices, and found errors that men with more education had overlooked. She learned the language of contracts without pretending it was magic. She learned which numbers revealed hunger, waste, or deceit. After 8 months, Mr. Harcourt entrusted her with the accounts of 3 small estates. After 2 years, she opened a modest office with Mrs. Bell, managing correspondence, and Lucy keeping files. They advised widows, daughters, and householders who had been told figures were not women's business. Martha sent jars of preserves from Ravenshade. Thomas retired to a cottage whose roof Evelyn made certain was repaired before the next winter. Araminta did not return to society that season. She moved with an elderly cousin to a small house near Bath. At first, her letters to Evelyn were full of explanations. Later, they became simpler. She admitted that she had laughed because laughter kept her safe beside Corisande. She admitted that she had enjoyed what she suspected was unfair. She did not ask to be declared innocent. 3 years after the Greyhaven Assembly, she came to London. Evelyn met her in a public garden. The trees were bare, and frost silvered the path. It was the only place where reconciliation could occur without a roof pressing old rolls upon them. Araminta wore a plain brown coat, no pearls. She carried the 2 torn halves of the Duke's invitation. "I kept them," she said. Evelyn looked at the split seal. "Why?" "At first, because I hated you. Later, because I hated the girl I was when I tore it." She held out the pieces. "I am sorry." This time, the apology did not hide behind circumstances. Evelyn accepted the paper. "I believe you." Araminta's eyes filled. "Do you forgive me?" Evelyn looked across the winter garden. "Not completely." Araminta nodded. It hurt, but she accepted it. Perhaps one day, perhaps. They walked once around the garden. Not sisters restored by a single conversation, not enemies forever. Two women beginning without pretending the past had disappeared. Lord Benedict wrote regularly. Evelyn answered rarely at first. He sold part of Ravenshade's western land to repay what could be restored to the trust and to repair the neglected tenant houses. He withdrew from society. Corisande's name vanished from invitations. Pritchard was punished through the law for destroying records and endangering Thomas, though the proceedings were described only in restrained terms beyond the county. Corisande lived with her relatives. She wrote one letter to Evelyn. It contained no defense, only 4 words. "I chose fear badly." Evelyn placed it in the cedar box beside Lady Marianne's letter. She finally opened her mother's envelope on the first evening in her own office. Lady Marianne had not written instructions for revenge. She had written that Evelyn must learn the accounts, trust those whose loyalty had been proved through service, and never allow gratitude to become obedience. At the bottom was one final line. A home was not the place where one was permitted to remain. It was the place where one's dignity did not require permission. The Duke continued to visit London. At first, he came under the excuse of consulting Mr. Harcourt. Later, he stopped inventing reasons. He never offered to rescue Evelyn. That was why she trusted him. He asked about her work. He listened when she disagreed. He supported a fund she created for dismissed female servants, but he allowed her name to stand before his. Their affection grew in the garden behind Lady Agnes's London house, where no ballroom watched and no family ledger decided their worth. When he eventually asked Evelyn to marry him, she did not answer immediately. "Will I be expected to abandon my office?" "No." "Will my money remain under my direction?" "Yes." "Will you object when I tell you that you are wrong?" He considered this. "I may object. I shall not forbid it." She smiled. "Then yes." Their wedding took place in a country church near Greyhaven. It was small by ducal standards and enormous by Evelyn's. Mrs. Bell sat in the first pew. Thomas complained that formal collars were instruments of punishment. Martha cried into a clean apron she had brought for that purpose. Lucy carried Lady Marianne's cedar box to the vestry, where it held the marriage papers. Lord Benedict attended alone. Before the ceremony, he found Evelyn in the church garden. Snowdrops had appeared beneath the bare hedges. "I have no right to ask forgiveness," he said. "No." He accepted the answer. "I am sorry." Evelyn studied the man who had loved her weakly and failed her repeatedly. She no longer needed his apology to stand upright. That made mercy possible, though not simple. "I forgive you for being afraid," she said. "I do not excuse what your fear allowed." Tears entered his eyes. "That is more than I deserve. It is what I choose." She left him beneath the winter branches and entered the church by the front door. Years later, the torn invitation remained in the cedar box. Not as proof that Araminta had once humiliated her, as proof that paper could be torn while purpose remained whole. On cold evenings, Evelyn worked at a desk near the fire, while the Duke read correspondence beside her. Sometimes a maid entered with tea. Sometimes rain struck the London windows. Sometimes letters arrived from women who had recovered wages, inheritances or homes because someone had taught them to examine what they were told not to understand. Evelyn answered each one carefully. The world had not become fair, but one locked room after another had opened. Dignity returned when silence ended. If Evelyn's journey moved you, please like this story, subscribe to the channel, and support us so more tales of courage, justice, and restored dignity can be told.